Thank you for responding. I appreciate it. And wanted to get really just a couple of questions to you about our industry. Talk a little bit about your experience, of course, what you're presenting with others at the Small Factors Roundtable, and appreciate and extend you our appreciation for you taking the time. So, with that being said, I always say to people, when I went to school, I didn't take any classes in factoring. Took all kinds of finance classes, took all kinds of banking classes, but nobody ever said, "Hey, there's this weird industry out there called factoring," right? and I fell into it like others did, as well as yourself. And when you started your career, if you look at your bio, you were in a real estate kind of a concentrated a retail aspect lending. How did you morph into this crazy industry? And tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, Brian, it's actually interesting. Right out of college for me, I got recruited into a publicly traded company. Literally, they got me at college where I went to in Fresno State. And so it was an on-campus recruiting with the idea that they were improving kind of their makeup of who they were across the United States. So they decided that this program for a bunch of college graduates. You had to have certain GPA and you had to be involved in the school. Anyway, bottom line was that was my start, and I've never left, if you want to call it subprime or non-prime or whatever, lending. And so when I kind of went into that, we did 4 different things. We did consumer lending, we did real estate lending, we did merchant financing, which is kind of that 90 days, same as cash stuff you see out there. And we did some business lending. And so as things kept going, real estate was the thing that they seemed to reward us more on. And I got pulled into that and moved to San Diego, where I am now, from that being recruited. And really, interestingly enough, factoring came to me from a recruiter, just from my bio that you've read a little bit, in the sense of things I've done and been involved in. And, really after that whole real estate debacle collapse, right, the Great Recession, blah, 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 then that's kind of when I looked at it, it was I actually went into it thinking, okay, how come I haven't heard about this? And wow, this seems easier than it is, all right, how difficult could this be? So, lessons learned in that, because it can be difficult, obviously, as you know, but that's how I kind of got into it. And once you kind of get into this industry, I think it's full of a lot of good people like yourself and so many others. And it's really like a small, type of fraternity or sorority or whatever you want, depending on who you are in there, because it is not easy to do it in this business. I think a lot of people are fairly gracious, in the space, and there's room for a lot of competitors, and quite frankly, right now, my book of business is probably 40% from my competitors, things I'm sure that I'll learn about what you do and things that I do that separate us. And so, yeah, that's how I kind of got to where I am now.
That's interesting. So that was with, I think that 4 was with a firm called, if I remember correctly, Capital Partners, Capital Funding, Capital Partners.
Good job. Yeah, that's my entry into it, was Capital Partners. Yeah, out of Carlsbad, a suburb here in San Diego, that is now been bought and is called eCapital. So you'll see eCapital across.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, in Canada and
eCapital bought at least Bibby in Canada, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the eCapital, I can't remember who was there before, but they just basically rebranded the whole, platform with that name. And that's right.
And then, boy, you really drank the Kool-Aid, because then you joined ICC. Tony and Cliff, I know well.
Okay.
I knew well, whatever the case may be, after they sold to Triumph a few years ago. So you drank the Kool-Aid. So you drank the Kool-Aid big time, and then you ultimately started Oxygen Funding back in September. And I got to tell you, I just love breathe easy. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just
right.
so perfect, right? For years, I've talked about peace of mind. I've talked about, being comfortable. I've talked about making sure people have your back. But how much, just 2 words, breathe easy. I love it. How did
Yeah.
you come up with oxygen? And tell me a little bit about oxygen. That's great.
Yeah. So, Brian, thanks for giving me the credit of starting that. But actually, it was a small firm that was been around, and there's a guy named Adam Lomax that was involved with it. And it was just kind of a very small company that I'd actually met with him 10 years ago when he
Okay.
started it. And he didn't really ever get to that level that he was looking for, just, variety of things at the degree of difficulty. And so that was something actually back then. He had a partner that they kind of came up with it. And that partner actually ended up leaving factoring because it was a bit over his, skis in terms of just all the various things. They had a one big, fraud, and the other guy was a CPA and said, I want out of this business. I don't like it. So, bottom line is I joined with another gentleman, Adam. He'd said if I ever was interested in, taking a real challenge, next step. And so that's how I got to Ox.
So you've been doing this for a long time now, and I love how you made the representation that, hey, look, it's easy. How difficult can this be, right? You give money out at 80%, and you collect all this this fee. So we're gonna go around here. So now on Friday afternoon, and in fact, I changed my travel plans based solely on the Roundtable for Small Factors. So you present Friday afternoon. Tell me a little bit about that that Roundtable for Small Factors, and what is it that you hope to achieve during that hour and a half or so?
I think what we're hoping to achieve, again, I'm still in that world. I come from that world. I don't think, other than maybe joining ICC for a bit, but it still felt small the way I kind of worked with Cliff and Tony, just the way it was. But I think, unfortunately, and I've been in the role of, maybe similar to you of, executive VP or president, my title, whatever it's been for a number of years, all the time in factory. So I've gotten to know a lot of different owners. And I think last year, at least in my journey, was bar none the worst year since maybe the Great Recession for factoring. A lot of the guys getting hit. If you're in trucking, you did a little bit better, but if you're a generalist, by and large, you got hit hard. In fact, when I went to the senior conference in Vegas in January, and one gentleman was down 60% year over year, and wondering if he could survive, and it was just so I think the theme this year for small, factoring is we kind of got it. We have a meeting this Thursday. It's either thriving and surviving or surviving and thriving, and the idea is to have some good conversation with a lot of people in the room that, maybe that we expect, a lot of small factors. It certainly means you have, maybe yourself and 2 or 3 other employees. And for sure, it's like less than 10. And, it's, I think we're going to hear a lot of different stories about people's journeys. And I think the idea is to kind of have some different tables, people talking about those, and hopefully somebody can take a few things from there that improves them and, in their journey, based upon, one of the guys that's presented with me, John Cummings, has been in this business since he's out of high school. It's like, it's hard to even believe. He's still a young guy, but, and so I think we're trying to pull things from guys like you and whoever out in the room is. And a part of, for me, fortunately, it was, oddly enough, it was a good year last year, and it had a lot to do with adapting, and not just doing the status quo. So I think even what you're doing here is not the status quo, Brian. You're taking some initiative that others aren't, and you're getting to meet people and connecting, and and through this, some business should flow to you, right? If you position it right. And I think that's a good example of taking a step out of your comfort zone, doing something different. And I think that there's a lot of ability, but people get frozen by fear sometimes. And people also think, wow, this is what I got, and I don't know how to advance myself. So anyway, I think the bottom line is we're hoping to have a couple ideas. I'm going to share a little bit about, some of the things we did. That really the reason why we had a good year wasn't if I had just stayed in factoring and that's it, I probably wouldn't have had a good year. But we, came up with a couple new products, did some different things, launched, to guys like my competitors and said, hey, if you're having a hard time with this, here's how we can help. And, and it's made all the difference. So I think that's the idea is that if it's hard to do it, but if there's truly could be a little bit of ROI out of coming to that session, and it's later on a Friday, so a lot of people are already have other things they're thinking of doing anyway. So hopefully we'll give a little bit of benefit back by just through some practical things that we think we can elicit from guys like you and anybody in the room, and kind of then distribute in a way that people will grab something to take with them.
I can't wait. I can't wait to see what comes out of that. Right. Roundtables are sometimes predictive and sometimes they're not. It's going to be great to see what comes out of that. So
the whole conference, right? The whole conference is going to be a different vibe, a different feel than any that we've had before.
Really is. What Bert and Heather and Terry have done is to be able to pull this off. And from a timing perspective too, it's in fact, I was just talking to somebody earlier today about a little bit of apprehension in terms of the virus, and yet, boy, it's going to be so wonderful to see friends and faces, and even meet new people. It's going to be great, and I, the way Bert and Heather and Terry have done things for years, we know it's going to be, it's going to be, what's the word I'm looking for? As
logically
conservative in terms of health as can be.
Okay.
From a small factors perspective, right? I love factoring. I'm biased. Nothing against our asset-based lending brethren at all. I've sat in both chairs, but I just love factoring. And even more importantly than that, or more poignant than that, is I love small factors. What from your perspective, having done this for a long time, what's the aspect that a small factor can bring to a client relationship that maybe some of our larger brothers can't necessarily do? What do we have an advantage, or do we have a disadvantage in the marketplace given our size?
Yeah, I think depends on how you aim yourself right out in that space. And again, there's niches, right? And as you know, there was riches in the niches. And so I think if you're a non-trucking general factoring, if you aim yourself right, there's an absolute advantage. The advantage to me is both the flexibility and the personalized touch that you have. And I would probably call that the leadership component that you have to get involved with clients. The reality is a lot of the clients out there that we encounter still, by and large, may not have heard of factoring. That's a confusing word. And what they know is they need help, right? They need help to, grow their business. And it's a do or die situation a lot, so, Brian, you're throwing on your cape sometimes to ride in there and, and rescue them. And I think that is something that we enjoy a lot in our roles as small factors, is to be able to really feel like what you're doing counts, and I think that's our advantage over the larger ABL brethren, which again, obviously what they do counts, but it's a more competitive, more educated audience that is looking for specific things that it already know about. And so it's still relationships, but it's on a different level. You and I have clients that probably got referred to us that all they knew is they needed help. They need to understand factoring. And then, you and I have had the joy of seeing how valuable factoring can be to somebody when its basic premise is buying and selling of invoices. And it sounds so simple and like, oh, it's just another maybe helping hand, another product out there. But many times it is not. It's like the life-saving hand that came out there because the way you, Brian, probably administer it, right? So the way you give some flexibility, the way you might over advance once in a while, the way you might, allow for something to happen that maybe went past its time, or, to a check that got cashed on their end. It was an accident and you didn't fry him. You understood their personality and said, okay, look at it the next time. And so you've given a lot of flexibility, and that means you've given some trust to people, and to the right people. It makes, the relationship, so solid, and it grows the business. And, in all my years and yours, you can, there's some people that would point back and say, hey, Brian was the guy that without Brian, my business wouldn't be where it is today. And I think that's the advantage we have overall is we really can feel it, be part of something, that's by and large, it's not a secret sauce. It's not like you have to have 20 products to do it. It's just how you administer it, and again, how you aim yourself.
I love the way that you described it. And it's, there is a secret sauce a little bit, in the sense that,
sure.
that to me, it's relationships, and everybody talks about relationships. But you know what I've seen and lived is those finance companies. I'll call them finance companies because they asset-based lending, factoring, purchase order financing, even term lending. Large entities can prosper if they promulgate the idea from a management perspective that their crew, their team, their leaders, if they can break down that decision-making matrix and still allow individuals to develop relationships, not at this level, but at this level inside their management, then they can keep the secret of still retaining that feel of a small, close-knit factoring company or a small, close-knit finance company, and deliver that kind of relationship and maintain those kind of relationships inside a larger factoring or a larger finance company. Hard to do, terribly hard to do when you have, governance and decision-making matrices that don't necessarily allow for that kind of freedom or that kind of flexibility. And it's especially hard to do once a large entity, once that big ship says, oh my gosh, we got a problem, let's start shifting this way. And sometimes the relationship takes a backseat. With that being said, I talked about that. Everybody talks about relationships. and the reason why we all talk about it is because it's so freaking important, right?
Yeah.
But yet, what is your feel? I always want to say that relationships are so important, but I think it's because I'm old. And the reason why relationships are so important to me is because I'm terrible at the technology stuff. I'm terrible at the fintech stuff. I'm terrible at all that stuff. So I want relationships to be important. But we continue to see technology be such an important part of what we do and how we communicate. What do you see the future looks like for this industry, both in terms of relationships and technology? Where are we going?
Yeah, again, well said, Brian, in terms of, and I would say it's, your years account to wisdom, and the reason you are who you are and how you got in there is relationships in your personal life and in your business life become all the more important as you get older, as you go through the minutia of making money and paying bills and what are you here for? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And I think all that comes down to is, in the end, is relationships. When this is all said and done, I go way back to the entity that hired me out of college, and some of those guys that were leaders I still stay in touch with, and that's what they do. They get together and they talk about, they formed relationships. You and I form a relationship with the business. So it's very important. I don't think it can be overstated or understated, because it's how each of us, relates to people too. And sometimes, the real word relationship can mean something very simple, or it can mean something very involved. And it's how you administer it. Again, going back to how I think that, works, it's how we administer it, how we live it, how we absorb it into our company, and how we, culturally approach that within what we do. As a relationship can be great. And you at 5:01, you could say, that's it. I turn off the phone, right. And I'll talk to you in the morning. Well, okay. That's how you define it. somebody else might say, whenever you need to call me. And, again, if you really need me, I'm there. So bottom line, I don't think that'll ever grow old, out of style, or technology can replace it. But I do think that, on the technology side, to what you're saying, it is really important to leverage the tools we're given, to stay competitive. And I think that the more the world of, crowdsourcing and digital platforms and cryptocurrencies, and the more all this comes in, right, the more that we have to keep up with a certain level of technology to implement to better ourselves. Like you're doing, you're absolutely bettering yourself by what you're doing here and pushing yourself, right? Not to accept just what you're comfortable with, but get outside of that. Well, for our clients, I think we have a certain responsibility too, to figure out how to do it, and for our partners. So, our banking, I get a lot from banking partners, and COIs and they've done right, past clients, right? That really said, man,
Yeah.
Brian, he was the best guy ever. Go see Brian. And so I think you got to leverage that. You can't just, allow that to, go on a piece of paper, that phone number, and then goes away and you forget, where did I put that piece of paper? So it's about how far can you, take that where you still feel comfortable, where you feel connected, and not that the quote technology is taking over the relationship, but where you can merge a nice piece of technology with the relationship, to better that. And, side conversation, we can chat a little bit at the IFA, but we're working on that right now. And same thing, I'm
Really?
going to push myself. Yeah. And there's a couple things I think we're going to do within auction funding that will put us ahead of others, just by using some of the basic tools of technology that are tough to do. In fact, my son is working with an intern, and he's in college. And so it's helping out a little bit to implement some of this. And once we figure that out, it's going to give me also a competitive edge, to a lot of, other small factors out there. So, the proper adoption of technology to me is critical. But if it all came down to it, I could survive on relationships and a piece of paper if I had to, but I'm going to stay small as a factor, and I'm going to have to ride some waves that I might not want to ride that technology might help me with.
I think you're absolutely right. I think first of all, it's cool that your son is helping you, right, with that technology and taking a look at it. The other side of that coin is, for you personally, I'm glad that your son is, because when you get to a certain age, technology. Sometimes I still wonder. I can't even spell technology, much less use it. So I feel good about that.
Yeah.
I think I love what you said is, I can establish relationships, and I can use a piece of paper and rely on that. But, Greg, I feel like at some point in time, it's just not going to be enough, because having a relationship is not going to be enough. At the end of the day, our client base is getting, and this is good for the most part, is getting more and more sophisticated as we all get more and more sophisticated, which means they rely on information and data that heretofore, even 5 years ago, didn't exist. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think it's a reality. If we don't offer the two, technology and relationship, then you might as well just march your way out the industry, because you're going to be left behind.
Yeah, in any industry, right? That's the knock on us older folks over the many years, is if we don't keep up, then we're put out to pasture, right? So I think all industries really, and factoring is just part of that needs to keep up with a certain level of adoption to that, right? And to your point, people get more sophisticated, and the millennials, if we're going to lend to them, that's where they've lived off of since they're 4 or 5. Somebody puts a device in their hand, and that's it, right? So, yeah, well said on your part.
So, look, I said I didn't want to take up too much of your time. I'll try to live up to that. San Diego. Now, Sandy, you went to Fresno State, right?
Yep.
Bulldogs, is that right?
Yeah, nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And but Fresno State is not part of the Pac-12.
Right.
Yet.
Yeah. Right.
But they should be.
Right, they should be. I mean, in football, they've had a good run, and and I guess the three main sports they should be, right? I mean, they've won a baseball World Series.
Yeah.
They've done pretty well in basketball. They've got a couple, the good tournaments that we're all familiar with, March Madness, and football has been their bailiwick for a long time. But really, it's still a state school that is hard to keep up with the UCLA's and the USC's of the world, and so
That's no knock on them. That's hard for everybody to keep up with UCLA and USC's of the world.
yeah.
But San Diego's not native, right?
No.
But you've been there for a long, long time.
Yeah, about 20 years. I got moved over, a corporate move for the company that I went into. They'd recruited me from that space into pure real estate. And then, like a lot of things, you get into San Diego or a place you really like, you try to stick and stay. So
I was going to say, I've only been to San Diego maybe 3 or 4 times, and every time I go, I always think to myself, why do I not live here? It's so beautiful. Okay, so we're going to close on this. Are you a pro football fan at all?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and not being native to San Diego, then who or what is your team?
So yeah, where I grew up, right, the influence. So my 3 teams are the San Francisco 49ers, the San Francisco Giants, and the Golden State Warriors. Although as the Kings moved into Sacramento, that's closer to where I grew up, but that was a little later, so would love to see them do good. But yes, the Niners is my team. Who's your team?
Well, then if the Niners are your team, my team obviously are the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, I had a feeling. Yeah,
boy, do we have some history we could talk about.
That's right. That's right.
We have some great games that we could share. So we won't bore our viewing audience with going down memory lane. But what a special relationship between those two teams.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. Right. That's fantastic. Well, listen, I appreciate you letting me come into your space. I appreciate you letting me chat with you for this half hour. Can't wait to see you